And welcome to a new episode of Dynasty Mind. Tonight I am joined by Shane P. Hallam, a longtime friend and a longtime Dynasty player who's also in the scouting world for a while. Shane, you've introduced me to Dynasty football. I know you and I got connected right as I found Twitter, found the world of Twitter, and Dave and yourself just really got me really very fascinated by the world of Dynasty because it includes a lot of preparations of rookie, looking at rookie scouting, understanding the college game. I know, and we'll talk a little bit about this later, what your influence is on me, but welcome and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. It's kind words. It's been fun being in the Dynasty community. I mean, I've been playing Dynasty since I got on the internet, pretty much as like a 10-year-old. I was playing in Yahoo leagues in 1996, and searching on message boards and finding kind of faux Dynasty leagues of commissions that would set it up, and so I've been playing for a while. I've run a Dynasty league. For about 15 years. I think we're in year 15 or 16 coming up this year. So it's a lot more fun, and I've really enjoyed it. Naturally when you play this long, you start writing about it, and I kind of through fantasy got into the NFL draft and really kind of went headfirst into college and film and film study. So I've been doing that for about a decade or so, really intensively. And those two things have kind of come together. And now that how we've seen Dynasty evolve and the Devi leagues and all the different amalgamations, it's really worked to my skill set, and I've had a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And 15 years, wow. That is like people this is before the boom of the dynasty industry. We're talking about before DLF even existed, or maybe they just started up. There weren't a lot of materials, resources out there back then, and you're already in the middle of it by understanding the college game. And just wow, who was your first rookie pick?
Oh man, that's a good question. I should go back and look. I think we still have records,
Okay, how about one?
sparsely somewhere, but I'll check it out.
Sure. What about the most memorable rookie pick?
Yeah, I remember like just making some weird kind of picks, even guys that I didn't like. One of my big like flops that I always talk about is JJ Arrington, was a running back for the Arizona Cardinals, like took in the second round when they really needed a running back. And I was like, yeah, like this is the guy, 2005. So that's when I distinctly remember a couple years in of being like, I don't really like this guy, but it's a good situation. And he was total trash. And so I knew it, when I was that young. But,
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
So that's crazy. So so I just looked up my first ever rookie pick was Larry Johnson for the Chiefs, Penn State. I'm guessing that worked out pretty well for me. So.
No, I'll say. I mean, I don't think he did much in the first year, but you have to correct me because I remember 2005 was my first time entering the fantasy football scene, so I don't even remember that far back. But Larry became a very good player for a couple of years. I remember him leading me to a championship. I even bought his jersey, and then he got overworked, just toasted.
It's that short but sweet. That was Larry Johnson.
And that was an anomaly back in the days where running back just fizzles after 2 or 3 years of high-end production. Nowadays, we see them being cycled through like crazy. Wow, that is a blast from the past. Now, I mentioned earlier that you were an influence in my Dynasty world because my first ever Dynasty rookie, we talked about it. I was like, man, I love this John Baldwin guy. And I know you were from Pitt, and you told me, no, don't. And I thought, he got drafted by the Ravens, draft capital, come on. Oh my gosh, that was the worst flop. It set me back a couple of years, of course. Yeah, so you have a big part in helping me look into rookies and helping me shape my dynasty process as well. So why don't you introduce to our audience here, what is your process and how have you shaped your process over the 10 odd years that you've been involved in Dynasty?
It's really interesting because there's not one right process, and that's, I think, what makes this fun. If we could kind of figure it out, like if everyone could figure it out, like then what would be the fun in that? But for me, I have definitely been a rookie heavy guy, and I like to draft rookies. I like to develop players. That's an important aspect to me, and so watching players in college, kind of getting a sense of if I like their game, matching that up to when they're drafted, where they're drafted, the team they're drafted, is that kind of fit? How's that going to work? And kind of diving in head first to take my guys is generally the way that I like to build a dynasty team. That being said, I'm when it's time to kind of cash the chips and push all in, I've pushed all in. When it's time to step back and rebuild, I've try to identify that early and make those changes. To me, it's about kind of trying to be ahead of the curve on what you want to do, and oftentimes making that distinction. Like, hey, if my team's not very good and I recognize that by week 3, then I need to start preparing, and I'm going to start getting picks, and I'm going to start making sure that I prep myself to put myself in the best position for the next year and the year after that. So that's important to me. The next thing is trading, and I think that's crucial to a dynasty success. And I think we're at a point right now in dynasty fantasy football where the trade is kind of what separates the wheat from the chaff, because it's not about winning the trade on paper, right? And I do it too. Like, I love making a trade and post it on Twitter, and everyone's like, "Oh, you did awesome!" Like, that makes you feel good, right? And then 2 years later, you didn't do awesome. Like, that trade didn't work out. That happens, and sometimes it's okay to take the loss of the trade if that's what's going to work out for you in the long run. So one distinct trade I remember is I had a team that was a heavy rebuild. I took over an orphan, and Le'Veon Bell was before his rookie year when he was hurt in the preseason, didn't play. People were selling him, so I traded my second round pick, which was probably going to be 201, 202. He was drafted mid-second in that rookie draft for him. And I got bashed for it. I wasn't even a big fan of his coming out of college. But I was like, look, I got to take a shot. I think he's going to start for the Steelers. And now that team, I won first place 2 years ago, second place last year. So, sometimes you have to take that loss and go out and make those trades. It's better to keep those moving parts than to stay stagnant and you're never going to improve. If you can have more kind of wins than losses in trades, then you're building your dynasty team, building those assets. You're improving. That's what's important. You can take a loss here and there, but if you have more gains than losses, that's important. And like I said, I think a lot of people today want it to look really good on paper. They want the recognition. They want to post it on a message board. They want to post it in a chat room or on social media and have the experts say you did great. And then it doesn't matter what the result is, and they never win. And that's what they care about. So I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. And I've seen a lot of great dynasty players, a lot of great fantasy players that, in drafts and in trades are off the beaten path, and it works. And I think that's important. So it's important to me to be in leagues that are heavy trading and for me to really explore options when I have them, have people I can reach out to. So, those are kind of the two aspects that I really treasure. I'm still improving in balance and how to balance a team and balance positions and how to kind of balance veterans with upside. I think that's something that everyone struggles with. It's something I continue to struggle with and definitely try to figure that out. And like I said, I think that's why it's so fun. It's why it's fun for me because I've watched. There are players that I've watched since they were seniors in high school. In everything. I've drafted one of the Scott Fish run leagues. I drafted Christian McCaffrey as a senior in high school. I drafted Ezekiel Elliott as a senior in high school. I drafted Saquon Barkley as a senior in high school. Right, so I've been watching these guys for 4 or 5 years, and that's really rewarding for me. But sometimes that can skew you too when you're like, hey, I really like this guy. and when he was senior in high school, and they're Devies. There are rookies that I've drafted because I liked them when they were freshmen in college, and because they're not that good anymore. So that happens too. And I think sometimes you got to step back, and that's something I really tried this year, is to step back and check kind of my own personal biases and anti-biases and see where I stand. So that's really my process. I like to stay active as much as possible. I like the rookies. I like bringing that up, and I like continuing to trade and not being afraid to take some risks.
Yeah, awesome. I think what boils down to, and just a quick summary of, I think your approach really speaks to a lot of flexibility and being not tied down to your first impression or your last impression of a player. And a lot of movements, like you mentioned, that really helps make the game rich, more fun. And all of that, what I hear, what I'm taking away the most is that you're not afraid of making mistakes. It might end out in a loss, it might end out in a win, but you're taking that risk and you have made the calculation, you've did your homework, and you were confident in your move. Even if it fails, this time you keep plugging away, chugging away, and eventually you'll shape the team that you want, which a lot of players, like you mentioned, want to win their trade on paper, win their trade now in May when we have June, July, training camp, injuries, whatnot still happening. But bottom line, don't be afraid to make moves. I think that's a fascinating process. So leading into this season of just rookie, we are fresh off the rookie draft. That happened like, 2 weekends ago maybe, and it already feels like an eternity ago. What are some of your thoughts for this year's draft?
I think this year's rookie draft is super interesting, and I think it's a super interesting study just in how we've kind of built rookie drafts in the past, right? It seems like we have these near consensus pre-draft before the NFL draft happens. We have these kind of these consensus almost rankings that happen, and then the NFL draft happens, and some of those players fall, and then we kind of as a community make a decision of if that fall was warranted or not, right? We either like write this guy off or we don't. The Isaiah Crowell's like is he going to be good or is he not going to be good? And we kind of make this decision, and then by the time we get to these rookie drafts, if you're in the Dynasty community, you have almost this consensus ADP type ranking that you have to follow in this draft, and this year's not that, and to me that's really exciting because you don't always get that opportunity of like, okay, I have the 1-4, so I'm going to get this guy. This year is not that way. I've now had 5 rookie drafts. 5, and I'm in the middle of a couple more. So I've seen heavy differences from the 1-2 to the 1-12 and through the second round of where players are going. And I think that's awesome because you have a little bit of everything with this. You have a Darius Geis that fell 2 rounds later than people thought he was going to get taken. What does that mean? You have players that got bumped up a lot more. What does that mean? You have these kind of college, 2 years ago as Quantum St. Brown, he was this stud. He was going to be the stud receiver, and he wasn't. Now he's drafted in the 6th round, but it's still a good team. So where do you put him when 2 other receivers? There's just so many moving pieces to it, which I think makes it super interesting because I've definitely seen people that are going with their gut on the player, even if they don't like the situation. I've seen people kind of do the opposite, say, hey, this is a much better situation. These guys are going to be 3-down running backs. This guy's going to be a starting receiver. I'm taking him. Or, kind of a combination of both of those things. So I think we have some unique situations. And I think looking at it, there's nothing other than obviously Saquon Barkley at 1-1, where you're kind of screaming like this is a can't miss. This is a steal. This is a great player and a great situation on a great team. That really hasn't happened this year to really feel like you got those 3 things combined. So it's been fun for me because I've definitely made some changes, where you've been part of that. Like I don't really draft Cleveland Browns. Like I don't do it because there's never been a Cleveland Brown offensive player since they've come back in the league. It's been good for 2 years. It's like 1 year and that's it. It's out. So Nick Chubb was my number 3 running back, as it was for a lot of people, or he was in that top 5, and I really haven't taken him. I'll probably take him one place just to diversify, but I in kind of the leagues that I really care about, I'm not going to take that risk. Where some people taking him with the 1-2, right? So that's a situation that changes my perception of a player and where he's at. Where for some other people, it's like Seattle's trash and they don't like Rashad Penny to begin with, so you're going to write him off. Like their offensive line's bad, and I don't, he wasn't ahead of Geisen and Chubb and Michelle and those kind of guys. So it's a lot of fun, and I think you really need to go with your gut and kind of trust yourself. I think that's definitely some other advice from me is just make your own decisions, and we really haven't done that in rookie drafts too much, and this year we really get to do that. If you want to take DJ Moore at the 1-3, you can take DJ Moore at the 1-3, and people may question a little bit, but it's really not that far off. So it's a lot of fun, and I'm really enjoying having such different drafts and not knowing where guys are going to go, and it leads to some heartbreak. But it's probably the most fun I've had drafting in a few years.
Yeah, that's I kind of sensing that, having been part of a couple of drafts so far. We've talked about Chubb in our league, the Thriller versus Godzilla league, and specifically I made a trade with you just to grab him, and just you reminding me, Browns, gotta be cautious about them, gotta understand that they have to show it first before you can jump head first in. I'm like, oh crap, but now I remember. Shane warned me about Trent Richardson when everyone was on Trent. And yeah, last year I thought they had an amazing class, and still we have not seen too much. We have seen flashes from David Njoku, for example, but not much else. So the cautious approach has worked out for you. I'm still taking chances here. Pie might hit me in the face. I don't know. We'll see. That's the fun part of it. You answered the part of the question is like, how do you approach this wide opinion of different rookies? We have no consensus so far. It has not happened in the last couple of years that I've been playing Dynasty, where there is no consensus yet by week 2, week 3 after the rookie draft. We're not seeing any consensus coming along, even in future mocks that I've been watching closely. Eventually, I think that it'll settle because training camp news or veteran news might shift some of the focus on that. So let me ask you this. Have you seen this type of non-consensus before in your years of Dynasty, and how did you react to it, and how will you advise people? Would you look more towards their pre-draft kind of talent, or is it really the opportunities or situation that really guides you in how you value the players?
Yeah, I feel like, I'm sure it's happened. I guess one year that definitely wasn't like this, but I remember like 2006 was the year with Reggie Bush and D'Angelo Williams and Lawrence Maroney, Joseph Adai, Lendale White, Maurice Jones-Drew, and you had kind of similar to this year with those wide receivers that weren't taken as high. I think maybe Santonio Holmes was the first one off the board, if I remember correctly. There was kind of those late, like first, second round Chad Jackson. That was his year. So you really didn't have a good consensus like people were talking about. We're talking about, obviously Reggie Bush was kind of the top pick, but after that, you didn't know. There's some people that prefer D'Angelo Williams, who's kind of the pre-draft. Like he was number 2 to Reggie Bush's number 1, but he went later than Lawrence Maroney. Lawrence Maroney went to the Patriots. Like kind of like we're talking with Sonny Michel today. It wasn't much different. What was that, 12 years ago? It's just crazy. Or Chad Jackson went to the Patriots. Well, he's with Tom Brady now. He was someone everyone was hyping up, and even though he didn't go in the first round, people were taking him for, but so there was a lot of that, like situational versus pre-draft rankings versus like Antonio Holmes being the first receiver off the board to the Steelers, which was a pretty good situation. Where you take Joseph Adai, where you're with Peyton Manning and you have a running back, but he's not drafted as highly as his other 3 guys. People really didn't have him high pre-draft. So it was a similar situation, and you had a lot of those moving parts. And that's, once again, that's what makes kind of rookie drafts so fun. I think for me, I definitely react how I react every year. And then it is about, the thing that makes this year different is usually, let me go through my process. Like usually I'll have my pre-draft rankings. I watch all the players. I watch as super deep as I can, the skill positions for sure. And so I have those rankings, and then the draft happens. And so I take a look at, all right, where were they drafted? Were they first rounder? Were they second rounder? Were they high second rounder, high third rounder? What was this team's draft capital and giving up for them? They trade up for them, that kind of thing. And what's that situation like? And let me take my pre-draft rankings. Let me make that adjustment. Is there a guy that went in the third round that I had super low? Let me go back and watch him. I probably missed something, or maybe there's a different role he's playing, right? Like John Brown, when the Cardinals took him in the third round. Like, this is a guy, I didn't have John Brown, very high. I didn't watch a ton of Pittsburgh State of him. And I watched him. I was like, well, he's decent. I don't think he's going to be anything, great. I don't think, I think he's a speed guy, maybe a special teams guy, but they took him high. So I took him late in one or two rookie drafts that worked out for those first couple of years. In some places I just ignored him like most people did, even though he was taken in the top 100. So, that's something that I take into account, and I make that movement. I think a lot of people get too stubborn one way or the other, that they're like, I'm a film guy and I watched all these guys before the draft, and I believe in their talent, and I don't care where they were taken. Like, let's be honest. If a guy fell to the seventh round, you better, something's wrong. Maybe it's not on you or your evaluation. It could be off field, it could be medical, right? We've had those issues, but you gotta think about that. You at least have to take that into consideration. So I kind of make movement in my rankings, and I kind of have my rankings, what I like. And I usually release it as close to after the draft as possible. I try to do just kind of an initial burst of this and get that out to the public, and then I'll think more on it and make some changes. And usually I keep that, to myself. So, that just from where I'm at. And then I see what usually is that consensus from the community. What does that ADP look like? And so where am I very different from that? Where can I maybe get value on the guys that I like more than the ADP or the community like? And that usually ends up being what I target, depending on where my picks are and what I need. And, all that takes into account. I do like I'm in enough dynasty. I'm in 20 some dynasty leagues, right? So, if we're probably anyone watching this is in way too many dynasty leagues. So look, I diversify. I absolutely, I would love to have every one of these top running backs this year, at least on one team, just in case. And it definitely happens. That's probably not going to happen. Like, I haven't run into Sony Michel yet. Hopefully I will, but that hasn't happened yet. And so that means he'll be great. That's just usually how it works, right? So that definitely plays a part in kind of my process. And so this year, with trying to deal with this kind of adversity, I've definitely gone toward more of a tiered system than I do. I think we all kind of have our tiers. I think you look at the ADP, you figure that out real quick, what those kind of tiers are and how you like that. But I think this year I've seen, hey, these are the group of running backs I like the trade with you. You really like Nick Chubb. You moved up a bit for him. I felt like I'm moving down. I'm still getting a running back at the end of my tier. I got Royce Freeman there. To me, that was fine. Did I like Rashad Penny a lot more than Royce Freeman? Absolutely. Did I try to move back up and get him? I did when he fell a couple more spots. Why I wasn't successful, but that was my way of trying to kind of play that trading game and make that movement. But I still got a guy at the end of my tier, and that's why I moved down. If someone 2 picks later would have offered me the same trade you did, I wouldn't have done it because I was going to lose out on that value. So I think this year that's been more of my approach. Like, okay, if I can move down a little bit and pick up those guys, and I've had a lot of drafts where everyone's kind of feeling that way. Like, I'm not moving up from the 1-5 to the 1-2. I'm not moving up from the because it's so crazy, you don't know who's going to fall. So that's definitely been my process this year, as it has in years past, but definitely taking less of a role in kind of getting my guys and finding those pockets of value. It's not there this year because it's so all over the board. You might end up with a guy falling to you at the end of the first or early second in the rookie draft that you didn't expect to be there. which is awesome, but there's no guarantee of that this year. Whereas, hey, there's a guy that's going mid-second that I really like. I could take it to 201, 202 and be really happy with it. And that really hasn't been the case. So it's been different, to say the least.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I definitely feel a lot of the parts, the moving parts, and especially having a tier rank over just a linear ranking has helped me a lot, knowing how far I can move back and still be able to hit on my guy. This year, there are a lot more for me at the top that I would really like, and I don't mind moving back a couple of spots. Whereas in the years past, I'd be more scared of, falling to the latter half of the first round, or maybe falling out to the second round altogether. So my plan has always been trying to move up. I've been successful in certain leagues. I've not been successful in certain leagues, and it's been fun. I've landed one Saquon, and that was because I had made that move way ahead of time before anything else broke, any news broke of where he landed. But that movement, that constant paying attention and having your own values, having your own rankings, definitely will help you feel more comfortable come draft day instead of relying on someone else's rankings and not having a good feel about that. So Shane, I'll have one last question before we head to our last segment. In your best guess, what are some of the changes you'll see from May to June to July all the way through August in terms of values, and what do you think people need to pay attention to or not be too influenced by to change their value too much?
I think that's one of the best questions you can ask yourself. As someone who has drafts all through the summer rookie drafts. Hopefully I'm not doing a startup this year because I don't need any more leagues, but you do a startup or even doing redraft, doing best ball or something like that. How do those values change? And a lot of things influence. I mean, we even saw it directly after the draft, right? Like, sitting here, listening to you that first day of the draft and kind of those discussions of players as they were drafted and where those values kind of fall, and looking at day 2, day 3. Darius Geis gets drafted by the Redskins in round 3, and it's, you look on Twitter and he's a number 2 guy, right? He's a number 2 guy. And then 2 days later, the coach comes out and says, well, he's a 2-down back. So, okay, we kind of knew that, right? If we would have stopped, we would have thought about it. We didn't need Jay Gruden to tell us that. We know who Chris Thompson is. We know what's going to happen there. But to a lot of people, that was, whoa, let me step back. And I see Seattle talking about Rashad Penny as a 3-down back, and that, puts that in flux a little bit more. So I think we're going to continue to see that. You see coaches make comments. We'll see. There hasn't been, I don't think there's been too much in this rookie mini camps. Every once in a while you'll get, just some raving review from a journalist that makes those changes. But obviously when we get to training camp and this guy looks really good and this guy doesn't, and that can go either way. We've definitely seen players that have had that. But I mean, Marcus Colston is a player I remember liking a lot pre-draft, falls to the 7th round, goes to the Saints. There's not really a spot for him. Training camp's glowing. Nah, I can't take that guy. Like there's no way he's going to do anything. And then, how a 7th round pick who should have been a tight end, ends up beasting at receiver. Like that happens. Sometimes you get those good reviews in training camp and it's legit. And sometimes you talk up players and they don't even they barely make the team. Or we watch preseason, right? And D'Angelo Henderson looks great for the Broncos. And hey, there might be a spot there and he doesn't, he's not active most of the time. So it's really kind of, I think that's where a lot of the luck element comes into it, is what can I take from who? And I think a lot is, who do you trust? I think you need to find journalists that you trust. I think over the years, just doing this for so long and seeing certain beat writers for certain teams that I trust at training camps that tell me, hey, this guy looks good, and they know what they're talking about, and they know what to look for from the coaching staff and how coaches are treating players in training camp. That's really important to me. So I don't think it's just like, hey, there's good buzz about this guy. Well, who's saying that? What are they actually watching? How much do they actually know? So I think that's a really important aspect of it. And I think you have to always just kind of keep things in perspective. So it's tough, but I think that's why perceptions change. Right? We're all looking for that value. We're all looking for that breakout star, and maybe it's the guy that we didn't think about, or we didn't watch that much in college, or wasn't high on anyone's pre-draft rankings, or got drafted in the 5th round. And especially when it ends up being someone in a situation that we feel like, hey, there's an opportunity there, then it's okay, this guy can do it. So a lot of it is just that general buzz. I mean, if you have some of the big players in the fantasy community, from the Matthew Berrys on down to the dynasty community, to the Ryan McDowell's and the Evan Silvas, talking up players, we see that change values in leagues where you have people that are on social media and in the know. It's not your neighborhood league. Like, that has an effect on value. And I like that, I like those guys. I trust those guys, but I differ with those guys at times. And sometimes I'm very comfortable if they're pushing a narrative that I don't agree with. Great. Let that player move up the board. So I think, once again, don't just follow the trend, but analyze why the trend is happening. When you see those players move up in value, or values change or get knocked down, what's being said about them, who's saying it, why are they saying it, how much are they actually in the know, how much are they able to actually watch of training camp, how much they know of this coaching staff, how much do we believe the coach speak that comes out and happens. Does that coaching staff have a track record of being honest with us? And I think that's important. And you can go back and look at it. It takes some time, but if you want to go back to a year ago and see what that same coaching staff said about their rookie class last year, you can look it up and see what happened. And I think that's important to do. So, I keep a Word doc just about all my leagues. I have each league kind of separated and different Word documents, and I take notes on, the competition and my thoughts and feelings and what happens, the trades that happen. I record, and I've started it probably 2 or 3 years ago. It's not much, but about like some journalists and some coaches, and kind of just taking notes of, here's what they said about this player, here's what they said about this player, just so this year when something happens, did I take any notes about that guy? Well, did that work out? And hopefully over time I can kind of build that, and if coaching turnover isn't like half the league every year, then maybe we can figure something out. But that's something I've started trying to do a little bit more, and hopefully this year I'll kind of feel more comfortable cementing some of that.
Awesome. Yes, guys, please listen. These are great advice for you to pay attention to. We don't want to be caught up from the hype, but we also don't want to underreact when something is worth reacting to. I think that's a great idea to just have a set of notes aside, looking at what the coaches say, what the position coaches say, what the head coach say about a certain player, and how that play out over the season. Because all we can remember is the big hype moments, or the whatever is said, and if it didn't come true, or if it did come true. But there's a lot of valuable information in between that we often filter out because we don't pay attention to. So having something down on paper, you can look back to last few years to see, oh, was this player hyped? How did he come in? What was the perception? Maybe I could have traded him when he was overhyped. Maybe I could have traded for him when he was not talked about as much, or he's been downplayed by a lot of the big heads in the dynasty community. And we have a lot of information now available nowadays. It takes a few seconds just to go on the internet to look for these information. So thank you so much, Shane. I think those are valuable information that our audience can take home. So we are entering into our last segment from what I like to play, the ink blot test. What it is, I'll throw you a mental picture of a certain player, and you tell me what are your first thoughts about this player when you stare at this player in a trade, in a draft, in ADP, what have you, when this name just comes up to your screen. What are your first thoughts? My first name to you is Julio Jones.
I think my first thought is hesitation. I think a lot of us are at that point of hesitation with Julio Jones. We know what the talent is. We know what the track record is. But between injuries, between the lack of touchdowns, between the inconsistency, I think he's a player that makes me hesitate. Like the name, you're like, boom, stud receiver, right? Like this guy's a stud. And then when you really dig into it, you look at the final rankings, and he's up there. He's always up there. Like, okay, that's good if that's what you want to look at. But when most of us in leagues where we have to start players every week, and he puts up this dud here in this 200-yard game the next week, that's really tough. That's really tough to handle, and so it gives me hesitation and kind of his value. Like, is this a player that I want on my team? And I think a lot of people are feeling that. I think he's a player whose value, if you're trying to trade him away, is probably tough to get what the name recognition deserves right now, and maybe it'll take a big game or a little bit of consistency. That being said, with Calvin Ridley, them drafting him, I think that's good for Julio. When was Julio at his best? Was when he had Roddy White, when he had someone else, and that's when we saw the most consistent from him. And we didn't have those big 200-yard, one touchdown games, but we had a little more consistency from him. So he's tough, and I think almost that top end of receivers is just not. Doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel as good this year, and maybe that's where the value is. Maybe that's the way to go. To end up with those guys now that everyone's running back crazed. But I think there's a lot of hesitation up there, Julio included.
Yeah, definitely. Last year was not as much, but this year people are really digging in, looking at his game log, and sometimes you might be surprised to see that this past year's game log qualify him more as like those boom or bust type of players that we thought like a Deshaun Jackson would be or a Tyreek Hill would be. But Julio is still Julio up there. He has some value. We'll see if the addition of Calvin Ridley really does help him open up some more plays for him. I have hesitation trusting Sarkisian. I have hesitation trusting that coaching staff. So my second player to you, Marlon Mack.
I think Marlon Mack is underestimated. It seems like we're just waiting to write him off. And I know there's a lot of people, myself included, that liked him pre-draft, liked the situation, thought he played well last year. I mean, he was one of those players that I devied after his freshman year in college, and I felt pretty good about him. And then, we go through this draft process, and the Colts draft one of my favorites in Nyheim Hines, and then they draft Jordan Wilkins later, and all these rookie drafts that are happening. I'm seeing Jordan Wilkins' name go up. I'm seeing the hype train, from Mike Clay and people that are high profile. Like, everyone just wants to just crap on Marlon Mack. Like someone's either going to sign a Mark Murray, or they're this drafted player in the end of the fifth round that sucked in college is going to do better than him. Okay, here's a player that was in a really difficult situation where you had a poor O-line, which they heavily addressed in the draft. We had a quarterback that has barely started, that I felt outplayed his, Jacoby Brissett outplayed his talent. You had a defense that was giving up a lot of points, so the running back wasn't exactly going to get a big workload. And Marlon Mack's doing everything that he should as a later round pick in the NFL draft. So he's someone that I see some value in. And if I find people believing in the kind of anti-hype or hype of someone else on the Colts, I'm going out and getting him, and maybe he'll blow up. But I do think he's underestimated talent-wise, and it seems like everyone's just looking for an excuse to find the next guy for the Colts, the real guy for the Colts, and that real guy is probably Marlon Mack.
Yeah, we definitely get bored with like old toys in a sense. Very, very much into the shiny new toys. We create these narratives because the coaches did this, X, Y, and Z. I think the coaching staff here would employ more of a multi-running backfield, but at the end of the day, I do think experience will play out better in year one and going forward if he is able to prove himself. Hey, perhaps he has a bigger role. And yes, you and I, we like I can't pronounce his name, Hines.
Yeah.
But he's fun to watch, but he's also slight and a. So we just talked about Marlon Mack, Nyheim Hines. We're back here with Shane. Shane, our last guy to you tonight is Tyler Lockett.
My first impression is just little value with Tyler Lockett. I think he's a player early on in his career that I really enjoyed, and had a lot of places, and just the injury history the kind of inconsistency in the Seattle receiving core, and it just has not worked. And I think people are kind of trying to find, hey, Paul Richardson kind of broke out last year, a player that a lot of people liked when he was healthy. Tyler Lockett has had those shining moments. He's had those games where he's been really good. And I think people are trying to find that kind of pocket. I mean, I see people drafting him in rookie/free agent drafts, people drafting Amara Darbo, other players, just whoever in Seattle other than Doug Baldwin can we throw something at? I think Lockett's never going to be that consistent enough player for you to feel comfortable starting. That, yeah, he might blow up for a game or two, but I just don't think the value is there on a shallow dynasty team to really feel too much about. So he very low value in my opinion of him, and kind of a situation, other than the trio of Baldwin, Wilson, Penny that I'm staying away from.
Sure. And with the talks of Seattle trying to be more run-centric, Doug Baldwin is probably their best weapon that they can trust. They certainly showed that with the draft of Penny and a couple of blocking tight ends in this draft. So definitely Seattle could be going back to its old way, and we might see less emphasis on the passing game, not putting too much on Russell Wilson's plate. So these are the things that we have to look out for. Any case, thank you so much, Shane, for coming on tonight. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, your process, your wisdom to us. Tell our audience where they can find your work, where they can find you, and how they can get in touch with you.
Absolutely. I'm writing for fakepigsin.com and I've been having fun doing that. So you can check out my work there. Obviously, Twitter is where I'm most accessible, at Shane P. Hallam. So feel free to, if you have questions, if you see this and have a question on a player or just want to kind of talk Dynasty, I really enjoy doing it. That's where I have fun, and then hopefully in the next couple of years I'll kind of be able to get back to where I was the draft stuff and the dynasty stuff and writing a lot more. But I still love it. I still do my film study of these skill positions, and I like the community a lot. So if you ever have questions on trades, on player value, and draft stuff, I'm here to help.
Awesome. And guys, you can find him. His Twitter handle is on there under his picture. And you can find me at FF Dynasty 101. This is a feature of Fake Pigskin, and welcome to another episode of DynastyMind. Thank you so much, and have a great evening.